Hello, everybody. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show, because we really do have a tough one for you today, because every single story that I'm going to talk about today could be leading this show, and I'm going to try to break them down for you, explain them all in a reasonable time frame of 30 to 45 minutes, hopefully closer to 30, because I really think I can do it. We start with this. Biden says weapons will flow to Ukraine within hours as he has signed an aid bill, $95.3 billion on the board. More money to foreign wars and making the United States a general kind of contractor of weapons and violence across the globe. Meanwhile, we'll give you a full general report on Palestine. This is always important to do before heading to some of this university stuff. Mike Johnson had a little show at Columbia today where he pulled up for a press conference and was essentially met with loud boos from the protesters. Summer Lee won her primary pretty easily. We have Democratic politics extraordinaire Ryan Grimm able to break that down for us. And we also today have a report from Israeli media with apparent fear of arrest warrants among Israeli officials in News 12. We'll break down how likely that is coming from the ICJ. And the Supreme Court is appearing to waver a little bit on a big decision that they have to make with abortion. We'll give you all of that and more. 6 full stories that could be leading the show today, so we're going to have a lot of stuff to do. So let's not waste any time and get right into it. President Biden said on Wednesday that weapons would begin to flow to Ukraine within hours as he signed a $95.3 billion package of aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. So the Pentagon said it would rush the first $1 billion in aid to Ukraine, including shoulder-fired Stinger surface-to-air missiles, other air defense munitions, 155mm shells, Javelin anti-tank guided missiles, and cluster munitions. The next few hours, literally the few hours, we're going to be sending equipment to Ukraine. It seems like they're pretty excited to go in and do this as the vote kind of overwhelmingly passed in the Senate. Biden signed off on those aid packages today. Shout out to Bernie Sanders. I believe it was Merkley, not even Markey, which is pretty incredible. Merkley. And Peter Welch, also the senator, the other senator in Vermont that voted against this money to Israel. It was a difficult path, she said, but in the end we did what America always does. We rose to the moment. Biden said his criticism to Israel is ironclad. And it was, more money to Zelensky. But meanwhile, the big mover and shaker on this was Mike Johnson, and he was a long time opposed to Ukraine aid. He flipped on that. And apparently William Burns, the CIA director, was a crucial factor in winning his support. Also Donald Trump, I think, coming out in favor of, just ridiculously calling, as we talked about, those loans, or, the things that are never going to get paid back. Ukraine's never going to pay us back for the money that we're sending right now. But, Trump said, let's call them a loan and it'll be fine. The bill includes $60.8 billion for Ukraine, $26.4 billion for Israel, and humanitarian aid for civilians in conflict zones, which is BS when they're making no effort to stop Israel from blocking literally all the many, 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 amounts of humanitarian aid that have piled up around the borders of Gaza at the moment, and $8.1 billion for the Indo-Pacific regions, including also sanctions against Iranian and Russian officials. I think that's, if we break this down, I think it's just generally very, very interesting. Israel is, it's a crime. It's an absolute crime. And it's yet another black mark against Biden record, and a long list of the crimes that he's done inside the major crime of just the general supporting of Israel. Like, this is a genocide they're committing. We're going to get into all of the latest details about it in our next block. But essentially, this is just, it's just more money, more aid, and this fig leaf of a percent of that being going to supposedly humanitarian aid. It's just such a joke when, again, we continue to let them stop humanitarian aid from coming into Gaza at every single turn. We just revealed that we talked about this flotilla that was in the State of the Union that was about a month ago. There's still been no effort to build this quote-unquote flotilla, and build this dock to drop off aid, this pier that was supposed to be built. So it's just a complete joke there, and we continue to pay Israel's bills as it continues to drag us into a regional war, and oh, by the way, commit a horrific genocide against the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people in general. When it comes to Taiwan, this is kind of what I wish we knew a little bit more about. I don't think it's the direction that we should be going. I think China could be much more of a partner, and I think we could get a lot more. I think we shouldn't try. I really, am afraid of this kind of increasing Cold War posture that we're going to with regards to China. Seeing them as an enemy just because it's a reflex of what the United States has done. We're just at such a just lack of original thinking, such a lack of just different policy, different mindset, that we are just seeming to go right down this path, right down this, Cold War, Red Scare type path, when it's just something that doesn't necessarily need to be happening. In terms of all the people who say they want to open society seem to be, again, most freaked out when it comes to China, or at least getting something for us, as we kind of descend out of this number one role, and going into, a better position, in the same way when, the UK lost its empire, it got a welfare state. When we lose our empire, what do we get here? That was something that was negotiated by the leaders of the United Kingdom when they kind of lost, their whole British Empire. And it seems like we are kind of getting ready to hand over the reins to China, but it seems like we may just, flail our arms impotently as we do it. That's kind of a whole other broader conversation, but it's something I wish I knew more. I haven't seen too much of the details in terms of what this aid is going towards. I think just sending more, military aid to Taiwan, among some other things, kind of opening the channel for more investments. But again, I think putting us into an unnecessarily antagonistic position with China. Ukraine, again, we kind of talked about this. It's just money without cause, money to, kind of overflow Vladimir Putin and not to really win a war that Ukraine really does need to win. Checking Russia to a certain point is a good and it's an important thing, but we have no plan to actually put Ukraine into a position to go back to normal, to get back to a peaceful situation. I don't think we realize how hard they've been hit by this war and how many of their fighting age men are dead and how many of the rest of them have just fled the country. So I think it's much better that, there is some sort of effort by the United States to just get to some point of a resolution, whether it's diplomacy right away, whether it's diplomacy and fighting, and then, fighting and then forcing, diplomacy. There's just no stated plan. There's just sending weapons down the drain. And really what I think this is, we're going to see this continue to be used for. And I think it's no coincidence it happened right after Afghanistan was ended as just a black hole for weapons contractor money at the expense of ruining a country that, had a lot of problems, but, it wasn't going to be, a war zone in the way that half of Ukraine is right now. That's for damn sure. But these policies of just continuously aid, money, weapons, just flooding this government with, which is, by the way, a pretty corrupt government, in the grand scheme of things. The Zelensky government, with all the officials they've been firing and the elections they've been canceling and the parties they've been banning, to get to be the standard bearer of the Ukrainian people, I think is not really the best move. And also, we're going to continue sending all this defense contractor money down the black hole until it just becomes way worse of a situation than it is now, because again, there is no stated plan to win this war. All in all, just another instance of just the unstoppable drive for war in our government. Just more money for war. Everyone justifies it on both sides. This kind of establishment coming together. America rides to the moment, sends more money to foreign wars, spreads and more conflict, and it presents its posture to the globe as an aggressive contractor of violence and not peace, and just something that's so removed from where we should be democratically, and I think where we are democratically, if you look at the poll numbers and all that stuff, and the way our the people of America want the country to behave, but also a threat to America as we continue to put ourselves in positions, continue to beat our chest, send all these weapons abroad, get in all these dangerous situations, with no real benefit to the American people, as we see this bill pushing out billions military aid be signed here by Biden. Next up here, we're going to continue with some of the latest headlines. We already talked about the Joe Biden signing into law $95 billion of aid. That includes $26 billion for Israel, $1 billion in humanitarian aid, by the way, for Gaza. Great ratio there. More. Also, we talked about the whole just ridiculousness of it all. Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari has said the army will leave no stone unturned in our efforts to find the hostages. Well, the only time we've gotten hostages back is when you haven't used the army, frankly. But the comments have come hours after Hamas released a video of an Israeli-American captive, Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, who is currently being held in Gaza. Following the release of the footage, hundreds of protesters marched toward Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem, demanding immediate action. So yeah, again, not a lot of this stuff is, of course, awesome, especially to those who have just families, especially innocent people just having sitting in Gaza at the moment. I feel like I do feel sympathy for them. I don't think that in any way would dilute, the sympathy that we have for, the Palestinian cause and people who, they may not be perfect, but they don't go, these are some of the most pro-peace people that a lot of times got kidnapped at the border. Which is kind of one of the tragic things about October 7th. And it was definitely a very, very complex day there, to say the least, a lot going on. But, a lot of the people who were kidnapped were some of the most pro-peace people, and you've got to have, a lot of sympathy for them sitting in there. But it also does speak to a broader, living the life of a hostage in the middle of, a genocide. That is got to be a very tough thing. But yeah, also to speak to this tendency in Israel, where a lot of even some of the anti-Netanyahu liberal energy is not necessarily pro-releasing or not stopping the genocide, stop treating Palestinians better. It's just getting the hostages back, looking after Israelis and Israelis really only. Human rights lawyer Jeffrey Nice said it's important that in case of any potential investigation into mass graves in Gaza, to find evidence of how those killed were before or when they died. Were their hands tied behind their backs, or did they show signs of having been tortured in any way? Said Nice, who is a Jeffrey Nice, who is a human rights lawyer. We have seen, he said, by the way, that countries uninvolved or unengaged could be suitable investigators. And we have, by the way, continued to see reports of those, like those coming out of some of the hospitals like Nasser and Al-Shifa, where they had, hands tied, signs of torture, things like that. Mediating parties between Hamas and Israel have passed a video released earlier today by Hamas of American-Israeli captive Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, to the U.S. and Israel. Axios reported. It cited sources familiar with the matter as saying Qatar passed the video to Israeli and U.S. officials 2 days before it was released by the group, which is probably part of proof of life for negotiations and things like that. Israeli forces have raided the town of South Hebron, according to Palestinian sources on Telegram, verified by Al Jazeera, showing Israeli soldiers conducting a raid of Yada, south of the occupied West Bank city of Hebron. So, that's kind of near the Tulkarem area and some of the more northern parts of the West Bank, where some of the resistance to what has been going on here has been strongest in the West Bank, these kind of West Bank brigades that have been popping up, and that is presumably why they are in there today. The armed wing of Hamas, meanwhile, says it lured to mechanized units of the Israeli army, and it lured to mechanized units of the Israeli army and ambushed them in the El Mughraka area of the central Gaza Strip. So essentially, they probably blew them up with some sort of mines or something like that. And our last kind of Gaza story rundown here is that the Houthis say they have carried out military operations in the Gulf of Aden in the Indian Ocean, which is definitely something to keep an eye out as well. All right, so this one is going to be another quick one because we really did go over it quite a bit on the Monday show, which was, some of the campus craziness and chaos continues. So police officers and university administrators, this here is in the New York Times, continued, and by the way, last reporting there was in Al Jazeera. Apologize, always got to be more mindful of that. I get to, especially in the rushing show like today. And then we had our first story there from New York Times as well. This also from Andy Carney in the New York Times. Tense scenes continue to spread at American universities as House Speaker Mike Johnson appeared at Columbia, where more than 100 pro-Palestinian demonstrators were arrested last week. He demanded White House action and evoked the possibility of bringing in the National Guard to quell the protest, which Republicans have called anti-Semitic. More than 20 people were arrested at the flagship university Wednesday at University of Texas at Austin. In Los Angeles, officers at University of Southern California tackled some protesters and swept away their tents. Cal Poly Humboldt also shut down their campus over the weekend with protest concerns, and Brown officials warned students participating in an encampment that they would need to leave or face conduct proceedings. So Johnson's appearance to Columbia came as Namat Shafiq prepares to confer with the university senate, which could censure her as soon as Friday for violating students' rights with regards to last week's crackdown. There's this page that's been circulating on the Columbia website about how stupid they were and how bad and wrong they were to send in the National Guard on protesters in 1968 with regards to the Vietnam War, and they were recently commemorating the 50th anniversary of those events and all that. So it's just like they are really right back where they started from. They are doing some of the same things again, and they continue to, by the way, absolutely really show it's. I was just thinking about this, like so many left-wing movements that we see come up, they're run really badly. They have no clear leadership. They have no clear structure. And it doesn't seem like these people have any kind of clear leadership, but they just have this discipline and they have this ability to push through and not fall and not be susceptible to some of the BS that's been going around with some of the, these videos that have happened outside the campuses and journalists showing up trying to, speak to random students and, being met with, you got to talk to the group spokesperson. You got to sit over here. You can't just be going around filming random people. Like, this is something that would not have happened in the past and is definitely a big step up in terms of running these kind of grassroots movements. It's much more organized than we've seen in the past, and that is a very big, important, and good thing. And you're not, by the way, I was, here, talking to some UK people about this, and there's this maybe it's just a UK pretension about being just incredibly obsessed with your background or your class background at birth, and that can never change, or maybe it's uniquely American to assume that it would, but like there's this, he's kind of like a snide liberal guy, the guy who I was talking to, and he was just like just like, oh, Columbia, rich kids, that makes sense about what they're doing. But it's like, it's happening at University of Minnesota. It's happening at UT Austin. Like, these are not, Ivy League schools. These are big state schools, University of Michigan. Those are all examples of places where it's been happening, and it's happening naturally. And the people are very well disciplined, kind of following the same pattern, not, being susceptible to any BS. The Columbia endorsements that they've seen to their character over recent periods have been, incredibly successful from pretty, mainstream people who, in times where this has gone the other way, for example, like in England with regards to some of the, the anti-Semitism allegations that have been pinned. There has been no, the Jewish voices in, kind of anti-Israel movements have been completely shut out. This time, they're being amplified. There's being videos of the Shabbat services, the Passover Seder going around, Naomi Klein speaking there. It's all getting much more visible. And some of this, this campus policy, it seems like I may be speaking a little bit too soon, but it seems like it is really not having a major impact on public opinion. People seem to be relatively supportive of what Columbia is doing, just kind of doing it, or the students are doing, and really kind of repulsed about what Columbia is doing more broadly, which I find to be very, very notable. But it is going to be a Tuesday, on Tuesday, set a midnight deadline for the latest group of encamped protesters to disband the university, delay the prospect of police action for 48 hours early Wednesday. So that is going to be, so Friday morning they could be really going, saying administrators were making progress in discussions with demonstrators and are continuing to really negotiate, which would be a huge win and boost for the power of protest, which we've seen, fall up short with a lot of these protests. And it was a testament to how effective and how well done this is. I think, other American left-wing movements could, see some of the discipline that they've had here and learn from this. Benjamin Netanyahu tried to bolster this just, I think really pathetically. I think very few Americans, saw what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say and changed their opinion on this matter at all. But Speaker Johnson said Jewish students at Columbia had told him of heinous acts of bigotry, and he called for Dr. Shafiq to resign if she cannot immediately bring order to the chaos. Meanwhile, though, this is just in, the Columbia Board of Trustees issued a statement in support of the university's president, Imminent Shafiq, who has faced calls from Republican lawmakers to resign for failing to stop the student protesters and criticism from faculty members from having demonstrators arrested. The board strongly supports President Shafiq as she steers the university through this extraordinarily challenging time. All right, so we'll keep you posted on that. But we are on to our next story now as well. And Representative Summerlee, the first major kind of squad primary, has taken place, and Summerlee has cruised to a convincing victory. Ryan Grimm has a very interesting kind of breakdown on this against Bhavini Patel. Lee leads with a pretty blowout margin. The race was a test of the politics of Israel-Palestine, as Lee is among the squad members who had called out for an early ceasefire, and AIPAC who had been kind of hoping to take down. Yet AIPAC, which spent millions against Lee in her 2022 race and lost, took past this time, perhaps concerned that Lee's strong polling and broad popular support would make the contest a poor investment. But AIPAC didn't need to spend money, since Patel was boosted by a massive super PAC supported by Republican donor Jeff Yass, a Pennsylvania billionaire. Yass is a close ally of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and financed his controversial efforts to take over Israel's judiciary. Many Israeli political observers, including Yuval Harari, blame the attempted judicial coup, by the way, for distracting the country and allowing the surprise attack of October 7th. Not really sure I'm seeing, the logic there. With the decision to move security forces north to support rampaging West Bank settlers, and that makes more sense. Also, that seems more logical there, that they left Israel's southern border of Gaza minimally defended. The moderate PAC spent at least $800,000 in the Pittsburgh area race, which we'll learn more about when the next round of FEC reports are posted. Our campaign was built on a record of delivering for our democracy, defending our fundamental rights, and expanding our vision for what is politically possible for our region's most marginalized communities. Lee said in a statement on Tuesday night. Our victory is a rejection of right-wing interests and Republican billionaires using super PACs to target black and brown Democrats in our primaries, be it AIPAC or moderate PAC or any other MAGA billionaire in Democratic clothing. Squad member Cori Bush wants to return from St. Louis, where she's facing her own actually AIPAC-backed challenge. Tonight, the people of Pittsburgh showed our seats cannot and will not be bought. And that's what exactly we're going to show again in St. Louis in August. So that's going to be a very important one to watch, where there's a much better funded challenger, AIPAC supporting, but also kind of a moderate who's trying to attack her from the kind of criminal justice side. Both, AIPAC's money has been effective in the past, but, it's going to be another, all these tests are going to be little indicators, I think, for Joe Biden, these little squad primaries about the politics of Israel and how strongly it motivates people within the Democratic base. And this is already, a good start. There was a lot of money spent here. Wasn't necessarily by AIPAC, but, still a lot of money spent, and is a big win from Summerlee here. What powered her to victory, interestingly, was not just her enthusiastic grassroots support or unapologetic radical politics, but it was in some cases, her ability to win and in some cases take over the party establishment. So, as a member of Congress, she helped bring more than $1.2 billion in spending to her district in her first term. That helped her gain some local establishment support. Both sitting Democratic senators endorsed her, including John Fetterman, in the midst of all this Israel stuff, whom she has had kind of an icy relationship with over the years. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, a tight ally of AIPAC, also endorsed her. So too did local unions. So she is somebody who I think, some of the other members of the squad could learn from, was still kind of being unapologetically radical, but, getting to, and having all the same, AIPAC positions as Rashid Tlaib, but also, not attracting, some of that same ire. I think that a lot of that is, part of how strong Rashid Tlaib and, effective Rashid Tlaib's activism is what gets her a lot more, hate from some of the, the enemies of the world out there than most, or enemies of the left, I should say. In other cases, Lee and her allies became the establishment. Sarah Innamorato was elected to the state legislature with Lee in 2018, with the Democratic Socialist duo shaking up Harrisburg together. Last cycle, Innamorato was elected Allegheny County Executive, the most powerful position in western Pennsylvania. Lee also helped elect progressive Pittsburgh Mayor Ed Gainey, who gave her a key boost. Running for re-election with your allies in key positions of power is much easier than running solo against the machine. So a kind of interesting win and a testament, kind of glimpse about how politics could play out in the future for members of the squad and how they could be more effective together, as we've kind of been saying for a minute. All right, so this one caught my eye from actually a pro-Israeli account on Twitter, and this was from News 12. The fear of arrest warrants for Israeli officials, it would not have been possible without a green light from the United States. That's the headline that's kind of translated here. This is all, by the way, from direct Hebrew translation from News 12, so English may be a little bit clunky, but essentially the point is that very senior officials associated with the International Criminal Court in The Hague have referred to Israel's fear of arrest warrants for senior officials in the context of the war in Gaza. The officials told N12 that the intention to issue such orders would not have been possible without American context. According to them, the chief prosecutor in The Hague, Karim Khan, was elected to his position 3 years ago with American assistance. After being elected, Khan closed 2 cases that greatly troubled the Americans. And they say here that one of them was related to undeclared detention cells in Afghanistan, and other also related to war crimes committed in Afghanistan, which, bold for them to talk, just open their mouth about war crimes. It's like, they probably, they are right, they're right to investigate that stuff in the ICJ, but, Israel would know something about that. Regarding the intention to issue arrest warrants for senior Israelis, the sources at The Hague said it is impossible for the chief prosecutor that he would have decided on such a dramatic step in a war that is still ongoing with very little evidence, by the way. There's very little evidence. If he had not had at least a green light from the Americans, they're right. If this is true, this is another unprecedented low in the relations between Israel and the U.S. at a very sensitive time on the eve of the ground entry to Rafah. So, big question. So, essentially, they're alleging here that the ICJ is preparing arrest warrants very imminently for the leaders of Israel at this point, and that to do so, they would have had to get a green light from the U.S. Honestly, I think that them getting a green light from the U.S. to put these out is probably something that they would have to do. They probably would have had to, maybe not get a green light, but essentially give a heads up. I think it's very, very plausible. But, it comes to, with regards to the arrest warrants, like, it's just like, until I see more reporting on it, it's very, very hard for me to actually believe that there could be some real legitimate consequences coming from the International Criminal Court in terms of arrest warrants. Like that just seems to be a little bit too high, too almost good to be true for these people. But maybe we are living in a different world. Maybe we are living in a different time. So, this could also just be some just blatant Israeli kind of propaganda they're trying to push out there that is just completely untrue. And the ICJ is thinking of nothing of the sort. They're still trying to do, their kind of deeper, longer investigation into genocide after ruling that there's a plausible case for genocide earlier this year. They're still going for that, but this is definitely something I think to keep an eye on. It's very interesting, at least, that's coming out from this outlet at this time, at the very, very least. Possibly, they say, as soon as next month, as last week an urgent discussion on the issue was held in the Prime Minister's office with arrest warrants, possibly even against Netanyahu himself. A decision was made to try and take some last-minute urgent actions in front of the court in The Hague, in front of influential political parties, in order to prevent the issuance of arrest warrants. He also apparently raised this in front of officials from Germany and Great Britain. All right, so to our last story here, and look at the time that we are making. Wow. So it seems as if the Supreme Court, they're currently just considering a pretty big abortion law at the moment. Seems they are pretty sharply divided over whether federal law should allow doctors to perform emergency abortions in states with near total bans on the procedure in a case that could determine access to abortion in emergency rooms across the country. And by the way, this is only abortion when you absolutely need it and your life is at risk. So again, really not a good position to be in, not a position any civilized country should be in. But the lively 2-hour argument focused on a clash between Idaho, whose law limits access to abortion unless the life of the pregnant woman is in danger, and federal law. Questioning why the justices suggested a divide along ideological and possibly gender lines. What Idaho is doing is waiting for women to wait and deteriorate and suffer the lifelong health consequences with no possible upside for the fetus, said the Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar for the federal government. It just stacks tragedy upon tragedy. Justice Elena Kagan interjected the current situation seemed untenable. It can't be the right standard of care to force somebody onto a helicopter. Although the collision between the two laws affects only those women who face dire medical complications during their pregnancy, a broad decision could have implications for more than a dozen states that have enacted near total bans since Dobbs. The dispute was the second time in less than a month that the Supreme Court has grappled with abortion, a potent reminder that even after Justice Alito vowed in 2022 the issue would return to elected representatives, it continues to make its way back to the court as they continue to consider the availability of the abortion pill mifepristone, which is where most abortions these days are taking place. The Emergency Medical Treatment Labor Act, which is the bill that's kind of at question here, made it so hospitals receiving federal funds provide patients with stabilizing care. Under Idaho's near total ban on abortion, the procedure is illegal except in cases of incest, rape, or some instances of non-viable pregnancies, or when it is necessary to prevent the death of the pregnant woman. Doctors who perform abortions could face criminal penalties, prison time, and loss of their licenses to practice medicine. The Biden administration maintains the federal government conflicts with and should override Idaho's. Lawyers for the state contend that the administration has improperly interpreted the federal law in a way that would bypass state bans. So that's essentially lay out of that case. And, it really would be interesting to see how motivated they are to do some kind of overturn here on the abortion issue after really, John Roberts really getting worked up about the hits the court would take for its credibility. So that's going to be something that's going to be very interesting to watch. But again, still, even if this is decided in any way, close to the right way here, it's going to be a big help to a lot of women, but definitely no reason to sit back and rest on any laurels. All right, that's all we got for you today. I'm going to be back on Friday.